There are 6, which I think explain the Great Divergence. 1, competition. 2, the scientific revolution. 3, property rights. 4, modern medicine. 5, the consumer society. And 6, the work ethic. You can play a game and try and think of one I've missed out, or try and boil it down to just 4, but you'll lose. Let me very briefly tell you what I mean by this, synthesizing the work of many economic historians in the process. Competition means not only were there 100 different political units in Europe in 1500, but within each of these units there was competition between corporations as well as sovereigns. The ancestor of the modern corporation, the City of London Corporation, existed in the 12th century. Nothing like this existed in China, where there was one monolithic state covering a fifth of humanity, and anyone with any ambition had to pass one standardized examination, which took 3 days and was very difficult and involved memorizing vast numbers of characters and very complex Confucian essay writing. The scientific revolution was different from the science that had been achieved in the Oriental world in a number of crucial ways, the most important being that through the experimental method it gave men control over nature in a way that had not been possible before. Example, Benjamin Robbins's extraordinary application of Newtonian physics to ballistics. Once you do that, your artillery becomes accurate. Think of what that means. That really was a killer application. Meanwhile, there's no scientific revolution anywhere else. The Ottoman Empire is not that far from Europe, but there's no scientific revolution there. In fact, they demolish Taqiyuddin's observatory because it's considered blasphemous to inquire into the mind of God. Property rights. It's not the democracy, folks. It's having the rule of law based on private property rights. That's what makes the difference between North America and South America. You could turn up in North America having signed a deed of indenture saying, I'll work for nothing for 5 years, you just have to feed me. But at the end of it, you got 100 acres of land. That's the land grant on the bottom half of the slide. That's not possible in Latin America, where land is held onto by a tiny elite descended from the conquistadors. And you can see here the huge divergence that happens in property ownership between North and South. Most people in rural North America owned some land by 1900. Hardly anyone in South America did. That's another killer app. Modern medicine in the late 19th century began to make major breakthroughs against the infectious diseases that killed a lot of people. And this was another killer app, the very opposite of a killer, because it doubled and then more than doubled human life expectancy. It even did that in the European empires. Even in places like Senegal, beginning in the early 20th century, there were major breakthroughs in public health and life expectancy began to rise. It doesn't rise any faster after these countries become independent. The empires weren't all bad. The consumer society is what you need for the Industrial Revolution to have a point. You need people to want to wear tons of clothes. You've all bought an article of clothing in the last month, I guarantee it. That's the consumer society, and it propels economic growth more than even technological change itself. Japan was the first non-Western society to embrace it. The alternative, which was proposed by Mahatma Gandhi, was to institutionalize and make poverty permanent. Very few Indians today wish that India had gone down Mahatma Gandhi's road. Finally, the work ethic. Max Weber thought that was peculiarly Protestant. He was wrong. Any culture can get the work ethic if the institutions are there to create the incentive to work. We know this because today the work ethic is no longer a Protestant Western phenomenon. In fact, the West has lost its work ethic. Today, the average Korean works 1,000 hours more a year than the average German. 1,000. And this is part of a really extraordinary phenomenon. And that is the end of the Great Divergence.